Picture this. A mother stands in her kitchen, holding something smaller than a sugar cube. It doesn't look like much. Brown, hard, wrapped in foil. But when she drops it into boiling water, something almost magical happens. The cube begins to dissolve, releasing the rich, savory smell of beef broth, filling her kitchen with the promise of a meal. But here's what most people never knew. That tiny cube wasn't just feeding her family. It was feeding soldiers 10,000 miles away. And the story of how this strange little object replaced meat on two fronts, at home and overseas, reveals one of the most quietly powerful connections of World War II. What was inside that cube, and why did it matter so much? It was called a Bouillon cube, 13 millimeters wide, light as a button, wrapped in gold foil that crinkled when you peeled it back. If you held it to the light, you could see flecks of dark brown and specks of something lighter, salt maybe, or dried vegetables. Most families kept them in a drawer near the stove. The foil caught the afternoon sun when you slid the drawer open. The cubes rattled softly in their little tin. And when meat disappeared from the butcher's counter, when red ration stamps ran out by the second week of the month, that cube became more than a convenience. It became a lifeline. But there was something most civilians didn't realize. Every time they dropped a cube into a pot of soup, stretching their rations a little further, they were sharing a quiet ritual with soldiers far from home. Because those same cubes, packed into K-rations and C-rations, were keeping men fed in places where hot meals didn't exist. The story of the Bouillon cube is the story of two struggles, two kitchens, two worlds connected by something so small you could lose it in your hand. And hidden inside that connection was a truth about wartime that families would only understand much later. How did something this simple become so essential? The Bouillon cube wasn't born in wartime. It was born in Europe decades earlier when food scientists realized they could capture the essence of a long-simmered broth and compress it into something portable, shelf-stable, and almost indestructible. Swiss manufacturer Julius Maggi commercialized the first true Bouillon cubes around 1907, followed quickly by OXO in Britain and Knorr in Germany. By the 1940s, these cubes had spread across the world. American kitchens kept them in tins alongside the salt and pepper. They were convenient, yes, but not yet essential. That would change the moment America entered the war. When the draft began pulling men overseas, when factories converted to producing tanks instead of cars, when cargo ships that once brought coffee and sugar were suddenly transporting soldiers and ammunition, America's food system shifted. The government knew what was coming: shortages, rationing, and a civilian population that would have to learn to cook with less. That's when the Bouillon cube moved from convenience to necessity. Military quartermasters needed compact, lightweight sources of protein and flavor that could withstand tropical heat, Arctic cold, and the rough handling of supply chains stretched across two oceans. The cube fit perfectly. Drop one in a canteen cup of hot water, and a soldier had something that tasted almost like home. At home, meanwhile, Mary Harper stood in her kitchen in Cleveland, reading the new rationing guidelines printed in the newspaper. Her husband Thomas worked at the steel mill. Her daughter Ellie, 9 years old, was collecting scrap metal for the school drive. Her son Jack, 13, had started a victory garden in the backyard. And now, meat, beef, pork, lamb was being rationed too. Each person got 64 red ration points per month. A pound of beef cost 7 points. A family of 4 could stretch it, but barely. Mary reached into the drawer and pulled out a tin of Bouillon cubes. She'd bought them months ago, thinking they might come in handy. She didn't know yet how much she'd come to rely on them. She didn't know that halfway around the world, a young soldier from Indiana would open his K-ration dinner pack that same week and find an identical foil-wrapped cube tucked beside a can of processed cheese. 2 cubes, 2 kitchens, an ocean apart. But the connection had already begun. The cube became part of the rhythm of daily life. You learned to time it, not too early, or the flavor would cook away. Not too late, or it wouldn't dissolve completely. You unwrapped the foil carefully, because foil was precious now, and some families smoothed it out and saved it for the scrap drives. The cube felt hard and dry in your palm, dense with compressed flavor. Drop it in. Watch it sink. Then, slowly, the water would begin to change. First, a faint cloudiness, like the memory of something rich. Then, ribbons of brown curling upward. The smell would follow, warm, savory, almost meaty. It wasn't the same as a Sunday roast, not by a long shot, but it was enough. Enough to make a pot of vegetable soup taste like something substantial. Enough to convince your children that dinner wasn't just boiled potatoes and carrots from the Victory Garden. Mary Harper learned to stretch 1 cube across 2 meals. She'd use half to flavor a soup on Monday night, then save the other half, re-wrapping it carefully in its foil for Thursday's gravy. She learned that if you added a spoonful of kitchen fat she'd saved from the last time Thomas brought home bacon, the broth would taste richer, more like the real thing. She learned that a cube dissolved faster if you crushed it first between 2 spoons. According to government statistics, by 1943, over 90% of American households were using some form of bouillon or soup base at least once a week. It wasn't glamorous, it didn't appear in magazine advertisements with pictures of smiling families, but it worked. It filled bellies, it stretched rations, it allowed families to feel, just for a moment, like they weren't always making do with less. On the other side of the world, in a foxhole in Italy or a tent in the Pacific, a soldier learned his own version of the same ritual. The K-ration supper pack contained a foil-wrapped cube, sometimes beef, sometimes chicken. If you were lucky enough to heat water over a small fire, you could make something warm to drink. The cube dissolved just as slowly. The smell was just as comforting. And for 5 or 10 minutes, crouched in the dirt with a metal canteen cup warming your hands, you could pretend you were somewhere else. The bouillon cube didn't give you much, but it gave you something. And in wartime, something was everything. The cube became a kind of currency. Neighbors traded them. Mrs. Henderson down the block had connections at the grocery store and could sometimes get an extra tin. She'd trade 2 cubes for a jar of Mary's canned tomatoes. The church organized a soup night every Wednesday, where families brought whatever they had and pooled it into one big pot. Someone always brought bouillon cubes to tie the flavors together. At the school, Ellie's teacher showed the class how to make stone soup, an old folk tale about making something from nothing. But the teacher's version was practical. Everyone brought 1 ingredient, and they'd make real soup in the classroom. Ellie brought 3 bouillon cubes her mother had wrapped in newspaper. Another child brought carrots. Another brought a can of beans they'd been saving. The teacher dropped the cubes into boiling water, and the children watched them dissolve. The classroom filled with that warm, savory smell, and for a moment, the war felt very far away. When they ate the soup, spooned into mismatched cups and bowls the teacher had collected from home, it tasted like something their grandmothers might have made. But even as families learned to rely on bouillon cubes, they didn't realize how deeply those cubes connected them to the soldiers overseas. The same manufacturers producing cubes for civilian grocers were producing them for the military. OXO, Knorr, Maggi. These names appeared on ration tins in mess kits from North Africa to the Philippines. Every K-ration dinner pack contained 1 bouillon cube or packet. Every C ration came with a small envelope of powdered bouillon. Military planners knew that soldiers needed more than calories. They needed flavor. They needed something that reminded them of home, even if only for a few minutes. The cube provided that. Not much, but enough. And so, without knowing it, the woman in Cleveland dropping a cube into her soup pot and the soldier in France opening his ration pack were performing the same small ritual, unwrapping foil, dissolving something hard and brown into something warm and comforting, finding connection in scarcity. Then came the shortages, real shortages, not just rationing, but absence. By late 1943, even bouillon cubes became harder to find. The manufacturers couldn't keep up with demand. The military needed millions of cubes every month. Civilian production slowed. Mary Harper went to 3 different stores before she found a tin. The grocer apologized. He'd gotten a shipment last week, but it sold out in 2 days. He didn't know when he'd get more. She bought the last tin, holding it carefully like something precious. That night, Jack came home from the garden with news. His friend Bobby's older brother had written home from somewhere in the Pacific. He couldn't say where, censors blacked that out, but he'd written about the food, about eating the same rations every day for weeks, about how the bouillon helped, about mixing it with rice they'd traded for with locals, trying to make something that tasted different. Mary thought about that as she stood at the stove. She looked at the tin of cubes in her hand. 6 cubes left. She'd been planning to use 2 for tonight's soup. Instead, she used 1 and added extra salt and pepper. They'd make do. If boys overseas were eating the same meal every day for weeks, her family could stretch things a little more. The shortage revealed something that had been invisible before. The cubes weren't separate supplies. Civilian cubes and military cubes came from the same factories, the same production lines. When civilians bought them, there were fewer for the military. When the military needed more, civilians went without. It wasn't dramatic. There were no headlines. But families began to understand. Everything they had, soldiers needed. Every cube they saved meant 1 more could go overseas. The connection that had been abstract became real, personal. Soldiers, meanwhile, felt the shortages differently. When supply lines got stretched too thin, when ships were torpedoed, when convoys were delayed, the rations didn't always make it. A soldier might open his K-ration pack and find the bouillon cube missing. Someone in the supply chain had pilfered it, or the pack had gotten wet and everything inside had dissolved into a soggy mess, or there simply weren't enough to go around. On those days, meals became even more monotonous. Dry biscuits, canned meat that tasted like nothing, water that didn't warm you. The absence of that 1 small cube, something you could lose in your pocket, made everything harder. But Americans adapted. They always did. Families learned to make their own bouillon substitute. Kitchen Bulletin, a government-sponsored newsletter, published recipes for homemade soup cubes. You could boil down vegetable scraps, carrot tops, potato peels, celery leaves, with a little salt until the liquid was thick and concentrated. Then you poured it into ice cube trays and let it freeze. When you needed broth, you'd pop out a cube and add it to hot water. It wasn't quite the same. It didn't have the richness of beef or chicken, but it worked, and families took pride in it. They'd found a way to make something from what others threw away. Church groups organized bouillon circles where women would gather to make large batches of homemade cubes together. They'd pool their vegetable scraps, their salt, their time. Then they'd divide the results evenly. It became a social event, a way to turn scarcity into community. Mary Harper joined her neighborhood bouillon circle, 6 women meeting every other Saturday in Mrs. Henderson's kitchen. They brought their vegetable scraps in paper bags. They took turns stirring the big pot on the stove. They talked while they worked about their sons, their husbands, their brothers, about letters from overseas, about small victories at home. And when the pot had boiled down to a thick, salty concentrate, they'd pour it carefully into molds. Each woman took home a week's worth. It tasted different from the store-bought cubes, grassier, less smooth, but nobody complained. They'd made it themselves. They'd refused to let scarcity defeat them. Overseas, soldiers adapted too. They learned to trade rations. A man who didn't like Bouillon would trade his cube for someone else's chocolate bar. They learned to mix Bouillon with the powdered lemon drink that came in K-rations, creating something acidic and salty that helped with dehydration in tropical climates. They learned to crush the cubes and sprinkle them over canned meat, trying to add flavor to meals that all tasted the same. Some soldiers carried Bouillon cubes in their pockets as a kind of talisman, not for eating, but for comfort. The foil wrapper crinkled when you touched it. The cube was solid, real, unchanged. In a world where everything was uncertain, that small constancy mattered. And here's the quiet mystery that families only understood later. The cubes weren't just about flavor. They were about connection. Every time a soldier dissolved a Bouillon cube in his canteen, he was performing the same ritual his mother performed at home. The same smell, the same warmth, the same small comfort. He didn't have her kitchen, her voice, her face. But he had this. A tiny bridge across impossible distance. That's what the cube really gave them. Not protein, not calories. Connection. After the war ended, after the shortages lifted, after meat returned to the butcher's counter, the Bouillon cube remained. Families who'd learned to use them during rationing kept using them. Not out of necessity anymore, but out of habit, out of memory. Mary Harper kept a tin in her drawer for the rest of her life. Even when Thomas brought home steaks from the market, even when Ellie and Jack grew up and moved away, even when times were easier, Mary still reached for a Bouillon cube when she made soup. The smell reminded her of those years, of making do, of feeling connected to something larger than herself. Veterans remembered them too. Men who came home from Europe or the Pacific would sometimes find themselves reaching for a Bouillon cube when they made coffee or soup. The familiar foil wrapper, the hard little cube, the smell when it hit hot water. It brought back memories, not all of them good, but all of them real. Moments of warmth in cold places, brief comfort in uncomfortable times. By the 1950s, Bouillon cubes had become a permanent part of American cooking. Campbell's introduced its versions. Knorr and OXO expanded their lines. The cubes got smaller, more concentrated. The packaging got brighter. But the basic principle remained. Intense flavor compressed into something tiny and portable. And somewhere in that evolution, the wartime story got forgotten. A new generation used Bouillon cubes without knowing they'd once been a lifeline. Without understanding that those little cubes had connected a woman in Cleveland to a soldier in France, a child's school soup to a foxhole meal, civilian sacrifice to military survival. But the older generation remembered. Visit a home where someone had lived through the war, and you'd find Bouillon cubes in the pantry. Always. Just in case. The habit had become something deeper, a kind of insurance against scarcity, a reminder that hard times could come again. A tangible memory of years when making do felt like patriotism. And the smell, even decades later, that warm, savory smell could transport you. Back to a kitchen where you learned to cook with less. Back to a time when something as small as a cube could mean the difference between hunger and fullness, between despair and hope. The strange cube that replaced meat in World War II was never really about replacing meat. It was about something deeper. It was about finding connection in separation, about making something from almost nothing, about the quiet ways that ordinary objects carry extraordinary meaning. When Mary Harper stood in her kitchen and dropped that first bouillon cube into boiling water, watching it dissolve into something that smelled like home. She didn't know she was participating in a ritual that stretched across oceans. She didn't know that a soldier she'd never meet was doing the same thing in a place she'd never see, with an identical cube from the same factory. But the cube knew. In its small, brown, unremarkable way, it carried both of them. It carried all of them. Every mother stretching rations, every soldier opening rations, every family making do, every man far from home. It was a bridge, a thread, a tiny, tangible reminder that even in the hardest times, even when separated by thousands of miles, Americans were connected by the simplest things. The bouillon cube taught us something we're still learning, that the objects we overlook are often the ones that matter most, that scarcity can create ingenuity, that small acts of resourcefulness, multiplied across millions of people, can sustain an entire nation, that sometimes comfort comes not from abundance, but from the shared experience of making something last. And that a mother's soup and a soldier's ration, though separated by oceans and circumstances, could taste, for just a moment, remarkably similar. Because they came from the same small cube, dissolved in water, transformed by warmth, shared across distance. A bridge you could hold in your hand. A memory you could taste. A wartime connection that lasted long after the war had ended. That's what the strange cube really gave us. Not just flavor, not just protein, but proof that even in our greatest struggles, even at our most desperate, we were never truly alone. We were always connected by something as simple, as small, as powerful as this. One brown cube wrapped in foil, dissolving slowly into comfort. And that small comfort, shared between a kitchen in Cleveland and a foxhole in France, turned out to be everything.